A teenager in the United Kingdom just committed suicide. What she said before she died really stuck with me. She said more people will die from suicide during this crisis than from the virus itself. Is the fear of coronavirus more dangerous than the virus itself? Coming up today on Mind Fit for Living, this is the first video in a brand new series on fear. Hi, this is Lydia with Mind Fit for Living, and I'm going to begin by defining fear because I strongly believe that you cannot change what you don't understand. Fear is commonly defined as false evidence appearing real. That's like the layman's definition of fear. They use the acronym FEAR, false evidence appearing real. Think about that word evidence for a minute. Where else do we find the word evidence? We find the word evidence in the Bible, where God uses it to define faith. It says faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So while fear is false evidence, faith is the real evidence of your expectations, because faith is based on the Word of God, and the Word of God cannot be broken. Fear is based on changing circumstances, your experiences, your problems, your presumptions, your opinions, the opinions of other people. So fear is the anticipation of evil, while faith is the expectation of good. Here is a psychological definition for fear. I got this from psychologytoday.com, so this is science. Fear is an emotional response induced by a perceived threat, which causes a change in brain and organ function as well as in behavior. The first thing we glean from this definition is that fear is emotion. So when you're afraid, you're responding emotionally to what you perceive to be a threat. That's why during this crisis, we saw people rush out to empty the store shelves of toilet paper. They forgot about first aid kits. They forgot about Tylenol. They forgot about thermometers just in case someone comes up with a fever. People were getting into physical fights in grocery stores over supplies. It's called panic buying for a reason. And we're not even dealing with a food crisis. We're dealing with a health crisis because even in countries like Italy that have been hit the hardest, they have continued to keep grocery stores, pharmacies, and essential services open. So people could always go out and shop at any time, and the supplies would have been enough for everyone. But right now, they're having shortages simply because panic buyers rushed out and emptied the store shelves. So yes, we have a problem, but reacting in fear actually compounded the problem and made the crisis worse. That's what makes fear so dangerous, its ability to compound a problem. People overreact when they're afraid. Like the young lady I quoted earlier who unfortunately took her own life. Fear is pure emotion, so we act out emotionally when we're afraid. There is no reason, no logic, and no objectivity in fear. This brings us to the second idea expressed in this definition. Remember the definition. It says fear is an emotional response induced by a perceived threat. We have just addressed the emotional response part. Now we're going to talk about the perceived threat. What this definition is telling us is that fear is a reaction to perception, not a response to reality. That's why the same snake that is killed in Africa is taken home and worshipped as a god in India. So if you were to interview an Indian and an African, they would have vastly different opinions to raise about snakes. The Indian knows something about snakes that the African does not. So what triggers the fear instinct is the knowledge about the snake, not the snake itself. What causes you to be afraid is your knowledge about an object, not the object itself. That's why fear is a reaction to what you perceive to be real rather than what is real. Fear is a painful reaction to your own interpretation of an experience. It is how you understand and interpret something that triggers the fear instinct, not the thing itself. So in essence, we're not afraid of anything outside of us. We're afraid of our own thoughts about that thing. And hey, if your own thoughts frighten you, then it's time to exchange those thoughts for the thoughts of God. The third aspect I will add to any definition of fear is that fear is instinct. What this means is that fear is an unconscious process. We don't know when it happens or how it happens because no one consciously decides to be afraid. You don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, today I'm going to be afraid. No, it doesn't work that way. There's no logical thinking or planning in fear. Because when you're afraid, there's a decrease in blood flow to the brain's frontal lobe that is responsible for high order thinking. It is this element of instinct that makes fear so peculiar. With many other emotions, you can decide to turn them on or off. You can decide to be happy or to be sad, to be angry or to be pleasant, to be bitter or to forgive. You can decide to love or to hate. But the fight, flight, or freeze reactions are called instincts for a reason. These reflexes are automatically triggered when you're faced with something that you believe will harm you. This begs the question, how do we deal with instinct? How do you subdue an enemy if you don't even know when they will strike? The way we deal with an unconscious process is to bring it into the conscious mind so that we can hack the system with new information from the outside and interrupt the pattern. Ignorance is darkness, and we overcome darkness by shining a light on the problem that is shrouded in mystery. The French physicist Marie Curie said nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. She said, now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. So when you understand how fear works, you take it from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind where you can intentionally change your thinking and uproot it once and for all. In the Bible, when Gideon and the army of Israel were preparing to go to battle against the Midianites, God told Gideon, arise, go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hands. But if you are afraid to go down, go with your servant Purah down to the camp, and you will hear what they have to say. And afterward, your hands will be strengthened that you may go down against the camp. That's in the book of Judges chapter 7, verse 10 to 11. So God was asking Gideon and his servant to go and get an understanding of what God was doing in the camp of the Midianites. All that they needed to regain their courage was understanding. The problem was still there. They still had a battle to face. But their understanding of their problem, their understanding of that battle had changed. So their fear was not a reflection of their problem. It was a reflection of their perception of it. God is the one who declares the end from the beginning. And when he appoints you for an assignment, he has already seen all the pieces on the chessboard and he has rigged the game in your favor. This crisis did not take him by surprise. That's why when you're afraid, God gives you direction and your state of mind can change based on one revelation. Because fear is merely a symptom of a deficit in understanding. There are over 365 fear nots in the Bible. So there's more than one fear not for you today. And most importantly, every fear not is accompanied by a divine perspective. The disciples were terrified when they saw someone walk on water. They had never seen a thing like that before. And Jesus said, fear not, it is I. So Joshua, he said, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Why? Because the Lord your God will go before you and he will be with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. So he goes before you to make provision for you, and he stands beside you to fight with you. To the shepherds, the angel said, "Fear not, because I bring you good news of great joy for the entire world." To Mary, he said, "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You are pregnant with the hope of humanity, the Son of God." So there was a switch in perspective from the problem to the solution. There's a switch in understanding after every fear not in the Bible, because fear is a perception problem. What we just did in the first part of this series was mainly to lay out the psychological definition for fear. And the three ideas we received from this definition are: 1, fear is emotion. 2, fear is a reaction to perception, not reality. And the third element that I would add is that fear is instinct, triggered by belief systems. So to conquer our fears, we have to change our understanding. Click the thumbs up button if you like this video, and click the bell sign so you get notified every time I upload a new video. Please subscribe if you enjoyed my content, because there's so much more I'd love to share with you on this topic. And go ahead and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. People need all the clarity and the encouragement they can get at this time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay blessed.